Welcome in, Braves Today. BravesToday.com is where you're located. It is brought to you by Plains Coffee, PlainsCoffee.com. Use the promo code BRAVES and get your 10% off today. He's Lindsay Crosby. I'm Ben Taylor, and I titled this thing The Most Wonderful Time of the Year. And I told Lindsay, I said, there are some more wonderfuler times, like when you win a World Series. However, that didn't happen. So having the offseason, as soon as they say, hey guys, pitchers and catchers are reporting this week, I just get really excited that the fact that baseball is back in the air. And it moves rather quickly. A lot of people always think it drags. To me, it moves fast.
Yeah, it is not the new year till pitchers and catchers report, but it is. We were recording this on Monday, February 12th. There will be a game in 12 days.
Yep.
Now, it's a spring training game, but there will be a Braves game in 12 days. That's how quick this goes. You get 1 month of spring training games, and then you're in the regular season, and you're playing 162. Plus, hopefully, you're playing another 15 in the postseason or so. But yeah, so Wednesday, pitchers and catchers are due. So they're due on Valentine's Day, which is wild to me. I'm sure the wives love that.
Valentine's evening. I mean, restaurants are going to be booked anyway. You might as well go ahead and do it a day early.
There you go. The first official workout is on Thursday the 15th, and then the first squad workout with everybody is the 20th. Now, if anything holds like usual, a lot of the Braves position players get there early. A lot of guys are already down there. Chris Sale, when we talked to him after the trade back in January, he was already in Northport having thrown a bullpen at the facility. He is...
I was going to say, didn't he do an interview with somebody online and it looked like he was in the facility?
He was, yeah. When he talked to us, talked to the media after the trade and the extension, he was in the facility. He had come in, he'd taken a physical, he had signed the extension, he had thrown a bullpen, and then he sat down and talked to us. He had a Braves hat on, he had just pitched on the field. It was things. But yeah, no, so Atlanta's got a 30-game Grapefruit League schedule coming up, and they get just a couple days after everybody reports before they start playing. So it's going to be, it's a rather quick turnaround. And thankfully for Atlanta, you don't have as many new pieces to integrate into the team as a lot of other groups do. So it shouldn't be that hard to get the team ready to go for spring training. But yeah, we're 12 days away from Braves games, folks. It is here.
I wonder how much actual time a lot of them had off. Because, we saw some of the Venezuelan league, some of the Mexico league players playing down there as well, playing during the offseason. And so I'm not suggesting burnout whatsoever. But, we talk about the pitchers and catchers reporting. Valentine's evening is when they'll show up. Then they'll go through their workouts on the 15th, the very next day. And then 6 days later, then the players are going to be there. And they hit the ground running. Because like you said, in 12 days, they're going to be playing a game. So they'll immediately go into workouts. And I'm curious who all took advantage of the rest. We've seen something. I think Olsen and Darno were in the Caribbean somewhere at one point on a boat. So they got their rest. I promise they did.
They got their rest.
But I am curious about, I'd love to talk to one of them and say, how much actual downtime do you get?
Yeah, from what I have both gathered from social media and from folks that we've talked to and things like that, a lot of them right after the season is done is kind of when they dial it down for a little bit and take some rest. And then they get back into hitting or workouts and stuff like that. We've seen a lot of video, Ronald was in most of December. He was in Venezuela in the Winter League. And then by January, he was back in the States. And we've seen a lot of workout videos of him playing second base, doing different things like that to get ready. We've seen Marcelo Zuna. Travis d'Arnaud actually opened up a baseball facility. Him and his brother did. And so a lot of the videos we've seen has been him helping instruct and coach. And then while he's there, getting hacks in the cage and things like that. So I don't think that I think now the way baseball is set up and all the money involved, these guys don't really take a long time off, right? A pitcher may rest his arm for a couple weeks or whatever, but then they're getting back into light work to start prepping for the season. So I think that's why spring training doesn't have to be so long. And some guys have talked about, instead of 30 games, if they wanted to make it 20, that would be fine. And there was actually, surprisingly, when the season started late a few years ago, there was a lot of talk about that spring training may have been a little short. It was 13, 14 games, but it was closer to what they needed than 30, where it's a full month and you're just trying to, you're going in there and they'll play you for 4 innings and you'll come out because they know you've got 20 more of these games to go.
I think a lot of people, what you don't get, those that don't play in a winter league or go see live pitching or go play in a Venezuela league or go play down in Puerto Rico or Mexico, like wherever they go, wherever they may go, some don't. And that's what sticks out in my mind. A few years ago, Lindsay,
Mhm.
that guy, Gabe Gross, that I saw him in a gym and I knew him. I visited with him before. And so went up to him and I said, "Is this how the offseason workouts?" He said, "This is like a real job. Like if you don't do it, nobody's going to make you do it." And he said, "I got to get my work ins now because once he kept referring to it as the 162 begins, he just won't put a lot of time in the weight room. It'll be more about cardio, keeping himself up, keeping himself healthy." He said that's when the meal plans start kicking in and that kind of thing. So a lot of these guys, like you just said, when the people go, "Oh, they took a ton of time," no, they're still having to maintain, and some of them, if they're going to bulk up at all, they have to do it in the off season because they will lose weight and they will lose muscle throughout the season just because it's a taxing schedule. Because
Yeah.
when they're done playing in a city, they're immediately going and jumping on a plane and probably eating something that's not the healthiest in the world. And then arriving at the next city at 2, 3 in the morning, they go straight to bed so they can sleep late and go to the ballpark the next day. So it gets taxing throughout the year. So yes, they do maintain themselves and work out in the off season. And one thing I wanted to ask you, because this was in the article as well before we move on,
Mhm.
is there going to be an opportunity for Braves fans to see any games during the spring?
So depends on how you want to see them. If you are in person, then absolutely.
Yeah.
What's really cool about the way the Braves do spring training compared to some other teams is beginning on February 18th, you can go and get in for free for all of the workouts. Go into the backfields, things like that. 9 a.m. daily, you go to the green gate or gate 3 and you can get in and just wander the backfields, watch the minor leaguers play and the exercises and things like that. As far as televised games, it's they haven't fully announced the schedule. We know that at least 4 games, the final 4 home games, are supposed to be broadcast. Brandon Gaudin and CJ Natowski are going to do those games together. As far as we know, this will be their first 4 games together before the season starts. And then typically you'll see a few other games throughout the schedule get picked up here and there, whether it's one where it's going to be on the opposing team's television broadcast and you can get it and watch it, or if it's a random Saturday game and they'll pick it up for Bally or somewhere else. So you'll get to see some of them. If I remember right from last year, the 30, I think I got to watch maybe 6.
Yep.
And the rest were Atlanta Braves Radio Network. The entire schedule is broadcast on there. Part of the reason that we're going to spring training this year is because it's so hard to watch these games on television. So a couple members from Braves today, we're going to be driving to Florida, spending about a week down there at spring training, going to both home and away games, going to some backfields to watch some stuff, and we'll bring you plenty of content from that as well.
Oh, totally looking forward to it. It's been brought to you this time by Plains Coffee and plainscoffee.com. Use the promo code BRAVES. Get your 10% off of Plains Coffee. It's straight to your doorstep. They don't even roast the beans until they have your order ready and ship the freshly roasted coffee to customers around the world. Experience the goodness or freshness or freshly roasted coffee beans that are delivered to that doorstep we talked about. Get the turtle, get the Cinnabon, chocolate hazelnut, caramel, cinnamon hazelnut. And if you're not a coffee fan, you can also get tea as well. They do have that option. It's plainscoffee.com, promo code BRAVES, get your 10% off. All right, so heading into spring training, we talked about everybody else reporting next week at some point. One of those that will be reporting will be Michael Harris II, and you did an article on that because one reason being with him batting near 300 and having the success now that the changes in the lineup and with a regular everyday left fielder, and we kind of know what we're getting with Arcia, where do we bat him as far as this lineup is concerned, in your opinion?
Yeah, and to me, this is the biggest single lineup question that I have for 2024. And it's not because so much of the rest of it's known. It's just there's so many options here. Michael Harris has batted in all 9 spots of the order. Now, some of them not very much. He's got 1 game at cleanup. He's got 3 games leading off and things like that. But in the number 9 hole of his 252 career games, 152 have been batting 9th. And he is batting .302 from the number 9 spot with a slugging of over 500. And so there's been a lot of conversation. A lot of people have been saying, move him up to number 2 in the lineup. maybe move him from 9 to 6 or something like that. And so, like you said, I wrote an article and I broke down the case to move him up and the case to leave him where he is. And the short version of this is the case to move him up is you get more at-bats. The number 9 hitter on average will get about 100 plate appearances less per season than the leadoff guy. And it's just because obviously your leadoff guy is, for the most part, it's guaranteed to bat at least 3 times in a game. But if one person gets on, that leadoff guy gets a 4th at bat, right? Whereas you have to get 8 batters on during the course of the game to get your number 9 hitter another plate appearance. Like Ronald Acuna Jr. had 735 last year at lead MLB. Your goal is kind of 600, right? And so the thought process here is if you move him up in the order, he gets more at-bats. Even going from 9 to 6 ends up being like 50 more at-bats over the course of a year. And so there is an argument here about you put him at number 2. He is the fastest lineup regular on the roster. He's faster than Ronald Acuna Jr. Not by much, but he is. And it's so like you can put him number 2 and it gives you a lefty to break up Acuna and Riley. And you can alternate lefty-righty all the way down the lineup if you want to. So there's a really easy to understand case to put him at 2 or move him up or something like that. But the other part of this that I kind of looked at, I looked at multiple different angles as to why you don't want to move him. And the first reason was he doesn't really walk a lot. Michael Harris has a career walk rate of under 5%. The MLB average is like 8.5%. So somebody who's not as good at getting on, if it's not a base hit, as even an average MLB hitter, never mind, you're supposed to have your best hitter at number 2.
Right.
Combined with, he also chases too much. Combined with the fact that when you look at the math, and Fangraphs did this math, there's not actually a lot of run production difference in batting him 2nd versus 9th or anywhere else. They made some sample lineups. They did putting your best hitter at number 2. They did putting your best singles hitter at number 2. And they did the absolute worst lineup we could possibly make. They had a catcher leading off. It was a bad lineup.
Yep.
And they ran through 100,000 games to simulate the results. And the most optimized lineup and then the worst possible lineup over a 162 game season, the difference was 26 runs.
That's amazing.
Over the course of an entire MLB season, the best possible lineup to the worst possible lineup was 26 runs. Atlanta scored 947 last year. And so, moving Harris from 9 to 2 is not going from the worst possible lineup to the best. It's just getting him some more at-bats. So I don't know how much it matters. But then also the big thing for me, and the reason why in the piece I said, spoiler alert, leave him at 9, is he said he wants to bat there.
Yep.
Ronald Acuna Jr. is not the ideal leadoff hitter, or he hasn't been until last year when he had the ridiculous on base. He wasn't the ideal leadoff hitter, but he wants to bat leadoff. And so we leave him at leadoff, and he does better there than anywhere else.
Right.
With Michael Harris, to me, it's the same thing. He wants to bat 9th. He's comfortable. And we've talked about this before, on here and off air. Baseball's a really tough game. It's a mental grind. You play 162 games in 187 days. And if you are in any way not comfortable or not you want things to be in the most ideal setup for you, for what you want to do. And Brian Snitker is very good about getting guys the opportunities they want to do and being a player-friendly manager. He wants to bat 9th, leave him 9th. Because we've seen mathematically, there's not a lot of difference between batting him 9th and batting him 2nd. Because the worst possible lineup and the best possible lineup is 26 runs different over the course of a whole year. So leave him at 9 until you need to move him, like when you lost Ozzie a little bit last year and he came up and batted 2nd. But leave him at 9 because he wants to play at 9.
And we saw that happen with Matt Olson, moving him from the 2nd to the cleanup spot.
Example.
And he clearly thrived more in the cleanup spot than he did
Mhm.
at the number 2 hole. Now, one of my reasons for leaving him at 9 is he later on in the game is seeing better pitches because they don't want to face Acuna. So that's another reason he probably likes being in that 9 slot, because he's got a very good batter right behind him that they don't want on base, or they don't want to be able to lob softballs to for him to park them 450 feet away. So he's going to see some more pitches. Maybe not that first time around, but
Right.
definitely by the second and third time around in the ball game, when the lineup at that point just doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I mean, after the first time through the order, the lineup doesn't really matter, except when you get too late in the game. Are you getting that leadoff hitter a fourth or fifth at bat? Like, where you bat does not matter in the fourth or fifth inning. It's not a big deal. It's only at the very beginning and the very end is where that actually comes up. But he actually, I have a quote from Michael Harris in the story where they asked him, he had a giant game against the Giants from the 2 hole. And they asked him about, you want to stay at number 2? And he said, quote, I feel like I can just hide down there in the 9 spot and do my little damage and not really be seen down there because everybody ahead of me is doing phenomenal and has crazy numbers as well. I can hide down there and get more hittable pitches.
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
And if he gets somebody in front of him that is hitting well, if RCA goes on another tear, if Kelnick comes out here and has a complete turnaround, don't know that we're going to see him jump up and be a 330 hitter. We saw, Olsen have to go through his struggles his first year over, but the future does look bright as far as having somebody in front of him. So, yeah, I'm all for it. I see both sides of it, because when you start looking at those numbers, and if you guys get a chance, go to bravestoday.com and click on that article and see what Lindsay had. He had the side-by-sides of where his average at every spot. The sample size isn't large enough, but I did like that 6th spot because he batted 375 at that point.
Oh, my gosh. I know, right?
And then, so that stood out. 318 at the 8th spot, 302 at the 9th spot. Other than that, it doesn't look like he needs to be batting anywhere else numbers-wise, especially, I mean, it was only 5 games, but the 3 hole, goodness gracious.
He batted 100, yeah.
Yeah, he batted 100.
He had like 1 hit and 10 plate appearances or something like that. Something nuts.
Exactly. So I will say, from a number standpoint, if you're just glancing at it, I do love the 6 hole numbers, but again, the sample size is 19 games as opposed to 152 games over in that 9 slot. So you can find all that information at bravestoday.com.
Isn't it so nice to be like, oh man, this is so tough. Where do we put our 300 hitter in the lineup? Because he can't fit in this. Like, isn't this such a nice problem to have?
This goes back to when people start talking about the Dodgers versus the Braves. And I said the X factor to me is Michael Harris II. Your 9 guy is batting 300. And there are not a lot of teams in the history of baseball that can say that. Not just in baseball currently. In the history of baseball, the 9 hole was, first off, in the National League, it was the pitcher spot. So they're definitely not batting 300 there. But even since interleague play has come up, those are the guys you stick out there that are just not doing well, that are struggling. You move them around. You'll see 7, 8, and 9s flip flop on a lot of teams,
and it's a free inning for the opposing pitcher.
It is.
I don't have the actual article in front of me, but I remember late in the year when he got bumped to the 2 hole for a couple games, and this little discourse came up, and I had something where it said like he was hitting better in the number 9 hole than like 25 of 30 leadoff guys were from a home run perspective, from a batting average perspective. And it's like, he would be the leadoff hitter on almost any other team in baseball. And he's our number 9 hitter. It's wild.
It's unbelievable. We didn't get to it today. We'll talk about Drake Ball when we got to leave him hanging. Sorry, man. We'll get to it sooner or later. We'll talk about how he's the next Brian McCann within the system if he doesn't get traded before we actually visit about it. Speaking of visiting, go to plainscoffee.com. Use the promo code BRAVES. Get your 10% off, or you can get your tea as well as your coffee. Up to you. That's at plainscoffee.com. He's Lindsay Crosby. I'm Ben Taylor. It's all at bravestoday.com. Lindsay, as always, thank you, sir.
Thanks, buddy.